Hi everyone. Hello. My name is Alison, and I'm a co-founder at Back4App. I would like to thank everybody for attending this webinar. And for this webinar, we have selected a game called Pong to show you how Back4App can speed up the backend development and make you more productive. Any suggestions or recommendations about this webinar or ideas to new webinars, please let us know through this webinar chat. Okay, you can type your suggestions on our chat, this webinar chat. And now I'm going to introduce our speaker today. Alex is one of our seniors software engineers at Back4App, and we share a very detailed presentation on how to build a Pong game in Back4App. Please welcome Alex.
Hello everyone, I'm Alex, developer and architect for Back4App. I've been a Back4App employee from the beginning of the company, and I've been working with the software development for over 20 years now. And today, I'm going to show you how to use Back4App basic functionalities. Our presentation will be based on a Pong game. For those of you who don't know Pong, this is the Pong game. It's a classical Atari game. And we'll be adding some Back4App features such as Facebook login, database access, cloud code, and a few others. I'm assuming you have basic programming skills, and this presentation is going to be in JavaScript. So I also assume you understand that language. This presentation is targeted to beginner programmers, so we won't go too deep into features. Mostly giving an overview and explaining the logic behind it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the presentation, but at the end of the presentation, we will have question and answers time. Also, we will focus on the features shown today. So if you have any questions that is not related to what we will see here, feel free to contact me by email or by our support chat on the website. Also, if you have any suggestions of how we can make these webinars better, let us know on the chat. Your opinion is very important for us. So let's start. This is what I did before starting. Things that doesn't directly relate to parse or Back4App, but we will need in order to proceed. So I created a Linux server. This Linux server is running in Nginx. And inside this Linux server, I cloned this Git repository with the Pong game. You can find it on Google, typing Pong JavaScript. You get here. It's a open source program. And also, I created a Back4App repository with the webinar code we'll be committing to, so you're all free to download the code we'll do today, all right? Also, this is not to do with parse or Back4App, but is something we are going to need in order to proceed. I created a Facebook app. You can create your own going to developers.facebook.com and clicking this button here, you'll create a new application for Facebook. This is the application I created. It's called B4A Pong. And there are some settings we have to do in this application in order for Back4App and parse to communicate with that app so we can use Facebook login. Things we're going to need here. The app ID, this is very important. Parse is going to need this ID in order to communicate with this app and Facebook. Also, here in settings and basic, there are a few things you have to fill up in order for it to work, but mostly is the website site URL. Facebook is going to need to know from where your connections are coming from, so it can make a secure relation of transferring data. So I created this domain, webinar.back4app.com, and had to paste it here. If you don't do this, it won't be able to communicate. Also, your application has to be live. You make it live clicking this button here, okay? So now that my Facebook app is created and my server running my application, I'm going to come here and reload this website, and I can see the game running. You should be at this step in order to proceed, right? So this is the index HTML file for this website. Let me close this down. All right. So if I come here and change any HTML or JavaScript, it's going to reflect here. For instance, this string here, this is Pong, is this string here. So if I make this like this is B4A Pong and save it, when I come here and refresh the screen, the string changed. You have to be sure this is happening because we're going to implement lots of code here and then we're going to test the implementation there. So for start, we're going to put some JavaScript code, and the very first line of code we're going to put is here inside the body tag, a script tag linking to the parse.js. This is the code that will allow our application, our website, to have all the parse framework functionalities. If you don't do this, it won't work at all. And also, I'm going to open a new script tag here and leave it open. So inside this tag, we're going to put all our code. So the very first part, also I'm going to go to Back4App and create a new account so we can see the whole process. I'm going to type an email here, create a password, confirm the password, agree, and sign up. When you sign up, this is the screen you're going to get to. Here, you can choose an app name. I'm going to call my B4A Pong, and you can put a description for it. So, Pong Game with Back4App, and create. This is going to take a little while because it's creating your app in our servers and distributing your app among all our servers. So any server will be able to answer all the API calls you're going to make. There you go, our application is created. And now I have some settings to do here. Here in core settings, I'm going to click settings. And here we can find some very important data we're going to need in order for our application to work. One of the most important is app ID. The app ID is what identifies your app inside our servers. So you have to write down this number here. Also, I like to change my parse version to the latest version. This is not something you have to do. This is something I like to do because I like to be in the latest version. And there you go. Going back into settings. And here you have our keys. Each key is used for a specific language. I'm going to use the JavaScript key for JavaScript, and at some point in this presentation, I'm going to use the REST API key to make API calls through the REST API. And I'm going to need my master key as well, because some procedures ask you necessarily for the master key. So if you're implementing, for instance, in .NET, you're going to use the .NET key. All right? So I'm going to go back. The first feature we're going to implement is Facebook login. And if you scroll down here, you have the Facebook login block here. You just click settings. And remember when I said we have the Facebook app ID? My Facebook app ID, I have it noted here. You're just going to paste it there, click this plus sign, it's going to show here, and then save. Now my parse application knows to which Facebook application it relates to. I also kept my developer tools console open here, so I can type in some code, okay? So, going back to our code, there are a few things we have to do so our website or application knows exactly to which parse application it's related. So we have those lines here. I'm going to paste them there. There you go. Here I have to put my app ID. I get it from there, from the core settings. And here I have my JavaScript key. I'm going to get it from here. You have to change this for your specific application. If you don't, you're going to connect to another application. At the end of this presentation, I'm probably going to delete this application, so these keys won't work anymore. But as soon as you create your own, you have to change these values. Also, you have to change this parse server URL here. Here we are using Back4App, so this is our main address, parseapi.back4app.com. Later, we have to load the Facebook asynchronous when the window loads, so we can have access to the whole Facebook SDK. If we're going to write an application that uses the official Facebook SDK, we should use that SDK. But since we're using parse for that, this is the code we're going to paste it. It's in our tutorials in our website if you ever need it, and I'm going to leave it here. All right. So here I have my Facebook app ID. You retrieve it from Facebook, and you also have to replace to the version of the Graph API you're using. I'm using 2.3 here. And then we have to actually load the Facebook API code. All right. So now our application is okay to work with parse and Facebook. I have to add a little button here so we can click it to make the Facebook login. I have a little code for a Facebook login menu. I'm going to put some CSS code here in Pong CSS. This is just for formatting, so it will look beautiful, but you can use any regular button you want. I'm going to just paste it here. And I'm going to put a button in our website here in this session here. So this session is after predictions. Predictions is here. So I'm going to paste it right there. There we go. If I refresh the website, there is my Facebook login button. If you notice, this button here is calling the login method in JavaScript. So I have to code this function. I'm going back to the scripts tag we have all the way up there and paste my code. I'm going to explain what this code does. There you go. This is my function. Here in this line, I'm using the parse Facebook utils login function and asking the permissions I'm going to need the user to validate in order for me to succeed a login. All the information I need to retrieve from Facebook, I have to put here, and then the user must accept it in order to validate the login. Once it's run, it's going to check if that user ever logged before inside Back4App. So I have a success block here and a error block right there. If I have a successful login operation, I'm going to check if the user does not exist, is that exclamation point there, then I'm going to create a new user. I'm going to use Facebook API in order to retrieve the response name is the username from Facebook, and the response email is the email from Facebook. And I'm going to create a parse user for it and save it. Let's try if it's working. I'm going to reload the page. Let me open my console here, so if there are any errors, you can see it. You can see I already logged in before, so this is my username and my email. All right. If I got any error at some point, my error blocks can print those error messages by putting error.message. Okay. Since I already authorized this app before, I didn't have to click OK. But if I come here, back to my dashboard, by the way, this is what we call dashboard, okay? I can see all my classes here, and inside my class, I have a user class that is always already created when you create a new app. And if I enter that, I have my Facebook user here. This is my user and my email. And as long as I keep logged in, I have a session object that is related to the user object I'm using. You can see by my ID here, it's also set here. Okay? So this is Facebook login. Now all the operations I make inside my game is going to reflect here and be associated to my user. So now that we have a Facebook login, we have to create new classes and add some data to it. So I'm going to create a new class. There are many ways to create classes. You can create them by code. You can create them manually. I'm going to create a class manually here. Just create class. We have a few ready classes for you as examples. I'm going to create a custom class, and I'm going to call this class score. As soon as I create class, score shows here, and here I can add new columns to this class. So for instance, I can add new column. I can put let's say a number and give it a name, score. This is going to keep my scores from a specific user. I'm not going to save this right now because I have it in code. I'm going to show you how it works in code. But if you just create like this, it's going to work, okay? So, in order to add points to the score class, I'm going to go back here and add a new function. I'm going to call this function add point. I have the code for it here. I'm going to paste and then explain everything it does. There we go. So this function adds a point to the current user. So in order to do that, I have to know who the current user is. So I declare a variable called user and get for it the value parse.user.current. This will bring me the current user for this session. Then I have to set my score. So I create a score variable here, and related to the score class that's here, using parse.object.extend score. You can use this to make relations to any queries to any classes you possibly want. I have to query this class before trying to write to it, so I can see if there are any values inside it. So I created a new query here, and it's a new query score because I'm going to look for the score property inside the score object. And also, as it is related to the user, the current user, I have to put the query equal to player. I'm going to add an object, a property called player, where I'm going to set my user ID. Then I have my query.find is going to try to find the object player inside the class score. If it does, it will retrieve the object, and if it does not, I'm going to create a new one. So my success block has to check if my results has any objects, because for the first time I query it, if I don't have any objects, I have to create a new one with my player and set the score to 1. If not, then I have to increment the score that is already there. For that, we have to retrieve the old score value, and then you don't have to actually sum one more to the value. We have the increment, because incrementing the value is more efficient. So at this point, if I just save it and come here, there's my JavaScript console. And call add point. Is not defined. Well, why is not defined? It should be. Oh, I'm sorry, it should be here. I have to reload the website. See, there were no objects in that class, so I had to create a new one and then set the score to 1. It was like here, it responded with a success because it could query inside the classes, but it didn't found any object. So it created a new one, a new score. Remember, the score comes from here. It's an object from the class score. For this new score, I set a property called player, to which I'm passing a user. The user comes from here. It's my parse user current, the current user for this session. And I set the score for the property score of this object new score to 1. So if I come here and refresh my screen, look, now I have a score related to my user. You can see player. This is the player that came from here, to which I have my user. This is the current user. And the score set for 1, which is here. All the players in this case are related to users, so it actually writes down a pointer to a user here. So if I click here, it goes to the user class and show the user related to that. I hope this is clear. And now, let's make this a little bit more interesting, because we're actually going to make the game register all the points for my user every time I make a goal. This is inside a file in the code for the game. Let me just open it. It is this pong.js. You can get in the code we will leave for download later. And here you have this function called goal. This is the function in JavaScript which increments the points for the game. So inside here, I should call the add point method that I just created here in the index. So every time this function is run, it will add a point. But the thing is, this function is called every time a goal is made. It doesn't matter for which player. And I want to register goals only for me, because the other player is the computer. I don't want to keep registering points for the computer. So in order to do that, I have to put an if here. And this is not Back4App related, it's just a game related, okay? So I'm going to put a if player number equals. For this game, my player is player number 0, but I have to confess I'm really bad at Pong. So I think it will be better if you actually compute the points for the computer, not for me. Computer is player number 1. So if player number is number 1, which means every time the computer makes a goal, I'm going to add a point. And it's as simple as that. This is all the code we're going to change inside the Pong.js. Right now, if I reload the website and start playing, let's play one so I can play alone. Every time the computer makes a goal, it's going to register a goal for me. If I come here to my score, see, it's changing. Every time the computer makes a goal, oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. it makes a goal here. This game is coded in order to go to 9 points. So when it reaches 9, the computer is a winner. If I come here and refresh, I have 10 points. Remember, I already set up 1 point before, so it's 9 plus 1 that I created for myself at the beginning of the presentation. So this is how we query for objects and can retrieve and create new classes, new values, and change values by incrementing or decrementing, okay? Well, after that, something we can do is change the data we already gathered. For instance, let's suppose every time a user enters some data, any data you want, you have to check if that data is consistent for what you're expecting it to be. If you're going to use all this power of processment inside the device of the user, it's going to give you a lot of trouble. You have to write lots of code and use their processor and actually their battery as well. You have to send data across the internet in order for it to work, which is very hassle. And for that specific application, we have something we call cloud code. Cloud code is basically JavaScript that will run in Back4App servers. So you write JavaScript codes, upload it to Back4App, and every time you want, those functions are run and can alter the data inside your objects. Typical uses for cloud codes is to prevent invalid data or changing data at some point during your workflow. So, for instance, if you need to make sure a phone number has the right format inside your objects here, you can call it by cloud code. You can sanitize your data once it's here. You can require that every user specifies some data before or after inserting, and basically all the things that needs lots of processor power can be done in our servers. In order to show you that working, I'm going to add a new column here. It's going to be a Boolean column, and I'm going to call it is even number. And let's say this column here is going to handle if this value of the score is an even number. So it's going to be true if it's even and false if it's not. I have this main.js file here, which is empty, and I'm going to write some cloud code here so you can see how it changes the behavior inside your objects. This is the cloud code I have. For the before save action, it will run this code every single time. So before saving any object inside the class score, it will run this code, which is very powerful because you can do a lot of things with this using no processor from the devices, but it's a lot of responsibility as well, because if this code is complex or takes too long to run, it's going to be complex and take lots of time to run for every single save operation inside the score class. So you have to be sure your code inside cloud codes, especially for before something operations like before save or before insert or before delete, is very efficient. So for this code I just implemented, I'm going to check inside the class score, I'm going to get the score column and get the rest of the division by 2. If it returns 0, which means it is an even number, it's going to set the column even number to true. If not, it's going to set it to false. Another thing you have to keep in mind when using Cloud Code, it has to have a response. You can use a response success in this case, or a response error, depending on how you are going to handle your code. But if you don't put any response, it's going to freeze your code. So many people complain, oh, my code is not working. And when you actually inspect it better, it's missing a response for every case. It has to give a response. Cloud Code needs a response object. We have a few other methods that don't need, and I'm going to show you later. But if you don't put a response success or response error for Cloud Code, it's going to give you some trouble, all right? So in order for this to work, I'm going to come here and set my points back to 0, so we can go all the way up to 10 again. And come here in server settings, Cloud Code, I have the block here, click settings, choose files, and it's in my desktop. I think it's this one here. Yeah, that's it. When you open it, you can click it to make sure this is the code you uploaded, that is the right code, and you can save it. Once it's saved, supposing if your code is correct and working, if I come here and if I change this value, before saving the new value, it's going to change the is-even number. I can do this by here or by the game, it doesn't matter. So if I put 1, it's not an even number. But, if you note, it's automatically. If I put 2, it is an even number. If I put 3, it's not an even number. So if I start playing Pong again, and I'm going to put my cursor all the way up there, and keep refreshing this, when the computer makes a goal, see, it changed to 4 and true. So, as I said before, this is very powerful, but you have to make very efficient code in order for it to work. But what if you wanted to have a function that didn't actually change the data, but bring the data back to you? Well, Cloud Code can be used for that as well. I'm going to write a little code here, which will retrieve me information about a user. Okay, I'm going to call this getUser, all right, and I'm going to query inside the class user for a specific object ID. I got this from here. This is my user class, and every user has a unique object ID. I'm going to pass the ID I want by parameter, going to read this parameter here, and then find inside my database and print a response. In order to access this function from another place, I'm going to use a small program called curl. Curl is default in most Linux distributions, and you can install it on Mac or Windows, and it lets you make HTTP calls from the console or from the terminal. But if you don't have, you have plenty of tools on the internet, free tools that you can use to make HTTP calls. So I have the code for curl here. This is going to be also in the presentation. And this is how we can retrieve data from devices and from computers and other websites. Important things are, since this is a public API, I have to pass some identification so the program knows that I am a registered user that has access to that information. Once again, I have to pass a header, my API, my application ID. I'm going to get it from here. Oops, sorry, it should be from the server. And I'm going to need my REST API key, which I can get it from here. I'm going to tell I expect my response in application JSON. I have to put my parameter name here. That's I called. Object ID. Oh, I'm sorry, I called, yeah, it's object ID. I guess it's user. Yeah, it's the user. And then I'm going to put here the value I'm querying for. I'm going to back to my console and get my user ID. This is my user ID. I'm going to pass it to the parameter. And in order to call my method, I have to put the name of the method, is getUser, and curl. It should be okay, but now I have to upload my code again because I changed it here in my machine, but I didn't upload it to Back4App. So Back4App doesn't have that code in order to run yet. I'm going back to server settings. And cloud code. I'm going to delete my old code and choose the new file. Oops. I can click it and make sure this one has my cloud function. It seems okay. I'm going to save it. And now it should work. See, it brought me my name from the username because it's the string I'm getting from here inside the user class. So you can use this to query any object you want. We call this cloud functions, okay? Cloud functions always have a response. So every time you call a cloud function, you expect something to be returned to you. I'm going to close this, I'm not going to need it anymore. So, but from time to time, we have a few, how can I say, few processes that we don't need to get a response from. We just need the code to run. And there are many situations when we need that. For instance, if at some point during the night you have to compile some data or generate new data based on the data that you collected from the day, you don't need it to be answered to you, but you need it to be calculated. For that, we have something called background jobs. Background jobs is basically the exact same thing as a cloud function, but it doesn't have a response and can be scheduled to run at some periods that you define. Sometimes cloud background jobs are very useful when you have very, very long operations to run. For instance, let's suppose you have a report that takes a few hours to run and you don't want to actually wait for it to run. So you can use a background job that at some point of the day run, generate your report, and then you just consume it, okay? This is the most common application we have for background jobs. Thing is, at this moment, we don't actually support scheduling the background jobs. You have to call the job by yourself using a third-party system. There are many around the web you can use. I run my own background jobs using Chrome tab, for those of you which are familiar to Linux, or scheduled tasks in Windows, but you can have Back4App run this code for you at specific times, but it's your responsibility to make it run, all right? So I have an example of background job here. I'm going to paste it here. See, the cloud function is written with a define keyword. A background job is defined with a job keyword. This is the name I'm going to call my background job, reset score for user. Actually, I'm going to change it just to reset scores. I think it's better. And for this, I'm going to query the score class, the class we just created there. And I'm going to find all the results. The find method, if you don't put any parameters for it, it's going to bring you all the results you have. And then for each one of those results, I'm going to get that object and try to destroy it. And this is very important. Since all these APIs are open in the internet, you have to make sure that you use your master key in order to destroy any objects. This is for security reasons, and we will ensure that if somebody gets your endpoint for your API, they won't destroy your data. So we just put this user master key true. This is very, very important. If you don't use this, anyone that gets access to your job name and calls it is going to destroy all your objects in this case, but it could be just one object, all right? So I'm going to save this. I'm going to upload it again. By the way, I have many places where you can upload it. You can go here in Cloud Code, or you can come here and call server settings. It's going to open the same window here. I click settings. I'm going to delete my old code and upload again my main JavaScript file. By the way, this has to be called main JavaScript file, all right? If you give it other name, it won't run. So here is my reset scores. It seems pretty straightforward. So I'm going to save it. There you go. I'm going to go back to my scores. You can see I still have my score there. And now I'm going to make another curl, which again, you can use any tool you want to make this API call. I have my core here. Let's put my app ID again. And my master key. Again, this has to be the master key because I'm destroying objects, and objects can only be destroyed by the master key. You should always take care of your master key. If someone gets your master key, they can destroy your data. Oops, sorry. There you go, my master key. That's correct. And my endpoint, which was functions for cloud functions and get user, now is jobs for background jobs, and then the name of my job is reset scores. If I call this, see, I have an empty response because background jobs does not give you responses, okay? If I come here, I have my jobs there. Job status. You can see it's running. It should have run right now. And my score is gone. So at any point of time that you want to run very task-intensive, time-consuming tasks, you should use background jobs, not cloud functions. Also, when you do not need a response object, okay? And this is what I have for you guys today. As I said before, it is a very basic tutorial for beginner programmers. So now we're going to open for question and answers you may have. I'm going to type right now and answer some of your questions. It might take a while, but I'll get to you, okay? Hi guys, it seems there was some misunderstanding from my part, and I'd like to make a correction. You can actually schedule background jobs to run from Back4App. You come on app settings. Oops, I'm sorry, server settings. And then background jobs. You can schedule a job right there. This is a new feature, I didn't know about it, sorry. Well, guys, I'm going to get some questions here answered for you today, and then later we will answer by text the other ones, okay? So people are asking if we're going to give the code and the video. Yes, we are. This is the URL we are going to go is github.com/back4app/back4app-webinars. Here is the code. I'm going to commit the whole code we did and then put our video as well in a few minutes after the presentation ends. Let me see a few other questions. People are asking where we hosted our website. We have it on a server from Back4App in AWS. Okay, for people who are asking if we're going to get into more deep functions, yes, we are, but in another webinar. This one is for very beginner developers only, okay? So there will be more and they will go deeper inside Back4App and parse. Okay, I'd like to thank you all very much for participating. The code will be available as well as the video in GitHub, as I said before, in a few minutes. And I hope you liked it. And you always can give your suggestions of apps and functions and resources you want to know about, and then we'll try to focus on that on the next webinar, okay? I'd like to thank you all, and see you next time. Bye-bye.